Welcome to Divide and Conquer, No One Wins, hosted by Dom Scott, Managing Director at Alexander Hall, and the BYP Senior Leadership Team. Dom, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Divide and Conquer, No One Wins session. I am your host, Dom Scott, and I have to say I'm so excited because we have the BYP VIP in the house today.
Yay.
And now look, I could go really easy on them. It's their event, it's their platform, but I'm not going to do that. I really want to interrogate the topic of collaboration, not interrogate them. I want to interrogate the topic of collaboration and really garner their thoughts on why it's important and understand how they collaborate as a team. If this event and previous events are anything to go by, they do it incredibly well. So it'd be really interesting for us to get underneath the skin of it and learn a few things for our own career journey. So welcome everybody. The first question I have for you all is I'm keen to understand what inspired you to be a part of the BYP's mission. So John, let's come to you first and then we'll circle around to Mira, Tiara, Juhi, and then Kike at the end.
So I'm actually very lucky in that I got to work with Kike many years ago. Well, not many, that makes it sound like we've been doing this for decades. So early on, back in the day, I ran a company where I essentially made a platform that made apps for people. And it connected people and it was very fun. And I ended up, I think, Kike, you saw me on Dragon's Den. I ended up pitching on TV and I was pitching like dating apps and Kike was like, connecting people. And this one was like for beards or something. It was like, connecting people. I think there's something there, and got in touch. And we ended up building an app for Kike, which is like the very early BYP app. And it was really fun and it was really great working with Kike. And then when sort of BYP essentially outgrew what we were able to provide as a technology provider, we then helped them onto like the next platform, and we stayed in touch because it was just a very cool mission. I think BYP, just explain it to someone and you're like, yes, I like that. I would like more of that, please.
Yeah, I know the feeling. It sounds very organic and you get drawn in to what is a very powerful message. Mira, how about yourself?
Yeah, great question. I always struggle answering this like concisely. So just to give you a little bit of a background on myself, I am Indian and I grew up in Kenya. So I moved here at the age of 14 and I still go back and forth. So I rock my Kenyan band. I'm very Kenyan at heart. And essentially what I found growing up was I was always kind of the activist person in my household, to my parents' dismay, like always calling out racism on the dinner table, always kind of going to protests and got involved in politics quite young. And when I started off my career, I was always quite entrepreneurial and got into sales, but very quickly moved over in the diversity space because I felt that's where my passions of like activism, but also what I really enjoy in the business side kind of came together. And I was helping growing and scaling communities for women in tech and connecting them to corporations, like similar to BYP. But what I found in this space was this huge lack of conversation around like intersectionality, particularly race, and then specifically Black talent. And it was at this time around 2015, 2016, I started getting really into like reading books about race and class in Britain, understanding the history of like Black Britain, all of that. And I was just thinking like my community have got it quite good as an Indian community. Black community are quite left behind. Like, why is that? So I started investigating it more and it was just became something I was quite passionate about. I met Kike through this entrepreneurial program and we just hit it off. And I was like, you've got this incredible, authentic community of Black professionals. And I know corporations need to tap into that. And if it's not something that they want to do right now, they will want to do it. And we need to be at the forefront of it. So when I met Kike, we just started off like, let me help you with getting partners in through the door. And it just skyrocketed. And I became one of the co-founders and now run the partnerships team.
What's the team? Thank you for sharing. And Tiara, same question to you.
Yeah, so my little bit of context, if you can't tell, I'm American. So I've always had to advocate, whether it be for myself or for others, or the lack of others that look like me in a space. So that's always been natural, but it never was something that I raised my hand for. I'm pretty much behind the scenes person, just in general. So when I actually left my company, I was working in New York in the fashion industry. And of course, there's not many that look like me. I ended up at Google, and I think from there, for some reason, maybe it was the ERGs that were available, but just stuff was available, I felt like I could do more and I could be more vocal on a bigger platform. And then my work in the PR team and advertising, it all kind of came to me as that single person on the team. Like, how do we reach multicultural audiences? How do we make them care about our, I don't know, our toothpaste, our deodorant, whatever. I was working with some big advertisers in that space. And I was like, okay, well, you have to be authentic. So just by being a person of color, I was automatically kind of slotted in those roles. And then later on, I took more onus of that space and I became like a leader at in Google, the Black Google Network, which I loved.
Amazing.
And yeah, I did that in New York for some years, and then I moved over to EMEA. And coming into this new context of all these different people across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, wanting to understand their experiences with racism and not step on toes, I really sat back for the first year or so, just so I could really know, like, what does their life look like, and what battles are they facing that may be similar or very dissimilar to myself and other Americans. And once I had that context, I was actually nominated to take on the chair position for the Black Googler Network, and it was an awesome opportunity. But it put me at the forefront, and like I just became so intentional, and I needed everybody to understand the fact that we are so lowly represented was in fact an issue, and that was systemic racism.
Sure. I knew this session would be tough for me because there's so much depth on the call, and I feel like we just opened the Google ERG door and then just closed it again. That could be a whole nother session. So thank you so much, Tiara, for sharing. And Juhi, please talk to us about what's inspired you to be part of the journey.
Yeah, be part. So basically, I'm a couple of years older than the rest of the team, and as BYP actually espouses, your network is your net worth. So I came from a corporate innovation and corporate startup background, and one of my mutual contacts when Mira and Kike had raised their historic fundraise had contacted me and said, I think you should be meeting the co-founders of this very young team. They are just setting out. They're very young. They're very passionate, but they could maybe use an extra pair of hands to help structure the systems, the processes, the businesses. And I met Kike and Mira, and I think with early stage businesses, it is very, very, very much about the founding team. So I came in with a bit of reticence, met Mira and Kike. I was convinced, I was 80% convinced straight away. And then when I met the wider team and saw how much they've done, I think it's the team that's inspired me, as well as the mission, obviously, but it's very, very much about the team when you're at early stage.
Thank you so much for sharing. So Kike, same question to you, really, if you can answer it, really.
I can't.
Yourself? Does that work?
I can't answer it because I feel like everybody knows the story already. So I myself have vowed I cannot say that story anymore. So I need to get myself ready for 2022. I need a new story.
Yeah, I don't think people know you're an athlete. I think you should start with that one.
Well, let's not go there, because I think that's a fair point. You have told that story a few times, and we're very limited for time today. I have another question for you all. In any group, you always have a dynamic. You've got the ideas person, you've got the feet on the ground person, you've got someone who maybe is a better listener than somebody else. I'm really keen to understand the dynamic in this group and how you all balance each other, because clearly the output is excellent, but maybe underneath the water there's a lot more paddling going on than we see.
Yeah. There's a lot of paddling. I don't even want to kind of say, but I'd say, okay, if I start with Juhi's like the organized one. That's the best way to describe it. She's like, okay, KPIs, OKRs. Okay, this is where we are right now. I'd say something like, oh my God, I'm a bit concerned about. She's like, no need to be concerned. I'm on top of it. That's Juhi for you. Mira is like the grafter. Like she will graft like anything that you need. She's on it. Any kind of corner. She's not afraid to kind of say what needs to be said to the corporates, all that kind of stuff. John's like, I'm incredible at tech. Trust me. I've got this. I've been doing this for 15 years. And I'm like, all right, John, I know. I've known you for years. I trust that. And then it's like, yeah, he's built the algorithm. Thank you, John. And then Clara's like the brand person. So she's like, yeah, no, this needs to go here. This needs to go there. Very organized as well in terms of just the team, in terms of the brand, the marketing. So I feel like each person is kind of like, they have their areas and kind of how they are. And obviously, you know, senior leadership team, you can butt heads and be like, I don't want this OKR. No, but I don't want you to build this. I want you to build that. Or no, don't sell this, sell that. So that happens a lot. And I think for myself, maybe they can say, but I'm very much like, okay, I've got this idea. Let's implement it tomorrow. So I'm that person.
Well, I'm really intrigued because as you were talking, I can see sort of smiles and nods, and people think, well, I'm organised too. So John, I saw you nodding and smiling then. Is that a fair assessment in terms of how the team dynamic works? How do you all collaborate so well?
So I think that's spot on. I think what I'd add is that there's no stability when you are scaling a company this fast. Yeah. And so what we figured out was great communication 6 months ago. Chuck it in the bin. We need a whole new way because we've got new teams, new ideas, fresh energy. So I think it's less about making sure we're always stable in our communication, and it's more about having feedback systems so the natural instability, which sparks the creativity at the engine, like in our team, is allowed to kind of flourish, not get out of hand. And we have feedback systems and like just ways of talking that just kind of, I guess, allow a little bit of conflict, just a smidge of conflict, and then kind of lets it happen in a safe way.
Point, because my next question was how do you constructively disagree with each other? Like in any marriage, any relationship, any working relationship, you're bringing different ideas to the table. You don't want homophily where everyone's thinking the same things. How do you manage that process together? Maybe Mira, Tiara, Judy?
Yeah. I'll jump into this one. So I think one thing we've had to do over time is actually just rely on facts and data. So we can literally say, okay, we did this input happened, and that was the output, and that's kind of what's worked, as opposed to just like, oh, this kind of works and we think it does. I think prior to this, we were very focused on what we felt was good as opposed to what really was. And over time, we've actually built processes and systems to really understand, actually be like, no, this worked and this didn't. Or really communicate quite early on and say, these things are actually what we have to get right versus this is okay to fail on, but this isn't okay to fail on. So how are we all going to go together to ensure we're going to get to the same target? I'll be honest, it's not been easy, especially in the virtual world. You know, like it's already like very recently more of us are coming into the office, and you start to realize like things that were missed before aren't being missed now. Like we just go out across the room. So those are all conversations that we missed out on. So we were building this business and scaling at the fastest rate whilst we were entirely virtual. So there were things that were missed out. But I think the thing is we're learning. We're a young leadership team. We're putting processes in place. Juhi actually has been really good at having some of the experience to come in, because Kike and I are a little bit like idea, execute, boom, right? And then everyone's like, oh, what just happened there? Whilst Juhi's like her mom about it. She's like, oh, what? No, you need to put this in place. You need to put this in place. So essentially what we've done is we've got the people who fill the gaps for us quite nicely. And we know what our strengths are, and we don't try to do everything as well.
Thank you. So how do you create forums so that you can listen to the eclectic mix of ideas each other has? And it's also such a great point that in the lockdown, all those conversations, I call them water cooler conversations, don't happen anymore. And there's so much refinement to be had in there. So how do you create these forums in a remote working environment, or how are you doing them when you are in person?
I feel like John will be good to answer this one.
So the short answer is you overthink everything and then you write it down, and then everyone provides feedback, and then you improve the process. So we have a lot of different mechanisms for kind of trying to get on the same page with someone, because you can have a disagreement, but if you agree on what you disagree on, like, oh, from your perspective, this is the priority. From my perspective, this is the priority. What's actually important? And if we can at least agree where that boundary is, even if you disagree on sort of like what it represents, you can then make progress.
That is such a powerful point. If you can agree on what you disagree on, that's the premise to at least move forward. And
that goes back to the point Mira made about the data, that if you can be driven by the data, you can interpret the data in multiple ways. But then if you come into a meeting and you're sort of saying, the data shows me that I want to build this, or the data's showing that we want to sell this, or the data showing the branding needs to change to this. Oftentimes, where it feels like there's a conflict, they're actually completely mutual points, because ultimately, as a leadership team, we have the same goal. We're just following different paths to get there, which makes perfect sense with our different experiences.
I think Juhi and Tiara nodding furiously. So
I was going to just add, I think it's a really good question. And actually, I alluded to it in our earlier conversation or our earlier presentation where I just said we have grown at breakneck speed. And actually, there has been a real focus on KPIs, and you cannot become one of the fastest growing startups without some kind of focus on numbers. But this is also an area that we want to, keep improving on. And I think one of the things that we've realized as a leadership team is that we do also have to get more, we have to get buy-in from lots of different stakeholders. So how do we make sure that we're continually getting that buy-in from the team, the corporates, the community? Like what do we need to do to just keep getting better at that side of things as well? And again, just to echo what John and Mira have already said, I think there is a beauty in numbers. There is a truth to numbers. So if you take the emotion out and you just let the numbers talk, there is a truth to numbers. So
thank you. And Tiara, any thoughts to share from yourself?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really about simplifying. So I think there's so many amazing ideas that come from this team. But if we're able to simplify those ideas down to what are the actionable things to do, that's the best way. And that's the way that I can move the quickest. And I think the team appreciates speed. So making sure that we're on the same page. And this is a simple one, but I feel like it just removes so much confusion and potential conflict is weekly touch bases, right? Like I think Mira and I, for instance, we now I meet with Mira to talk about sales and partnerships and how that, they partner with brand and marketing each week, and also meeting with John and the product team each week. So we can make sure we're always aligned, like those check-ins to make sure we're on the same page. It really helps. So we don't go a month or so without meeting and then everything's completely changed and people weren't in the loop. We're a small team where we can do that now. So that's been really helpful.
Brilliant. So the other question I have for you all is, you're clearly all a very high caliber bunch of people, typically people who are like that, very competitive. And the danger within teams is that competition starts to turn inwards on itself and teams cannibalize themselves. But I get the sense that you compete to help each other, and that competition is channeled into a positive. So what's that process like? How does that work?
Can I maybe start with this? I've actually got a couple of really good anecdotes. So I would actually say that we're not at all competitive with each other, but I'm going to look at John when I say that Kike obviously was an ex-GB athlete. So I feel like sometimes so I feel like sometimes she has an exceptional idea of what can happen exceptionally fast. And I smile when I do this, but when I first started working with BYP, I remember I'd only had a few days to kind of get used to and immersed into the organization. And Kike and Mira just straight away put me in front of the investors. And I remember they just said to me, okay, well now Jimmy's going to go through our 12-month forecast. And I remember looking at them and thinking, we don't have a 12-month forecast yet, and I know, so I don't think there's any competition between each of us, because I think we have very, very separate domain expertise areas. Okay. I know that also, maybe John, do you want to tell a story about Kike and Mira, maybe getting roadmaps done in 3 hours or 15 minutes?
So yeah, forward planning is a constant source of friction. It's actually quite a really good example of where, if you're a CEO and you're going to investors and asking them for lots of money, they say, what are you building? And you go, let me ask John. He's in charge of product. He'll know what we're building. And then you come to me and I'm sort of like, well, I know what problem we're solving. And I sort of know, and we've got a good track record, but I have no idea what shape it's going to be. And you suddenly get this very weird conflict where a very reasonable thing becomes almost impossible. And you have to figure out quite clever ways to deepen the communication channel so that you don't get stuck trying to answer a complex situation with a very simple answer, but then not overwhelm the person that you're talking to. Like Kike doesn't need to know about all of the ins and outs of our database, but understanding our process of prioritization gives Kike the control and the vision to kind of see what's going. And then there's just a little sprinkling of trust to fill in the gaps, I think.
Sure. Kike, I don't even have a question for you now. I can just see you smiling and your names come up many times. So what do you have to add to all of this?
I think in terms of competition is about BYP being the best, right? So it's we're competing against the unknown. We're competing against the fact that we're fighting a war to change the Black narrative. We're competing because we want to be the best, the biggest organization there can be for this kind of field, and we want to show the representation of a Black business scaling You know, why can't we be a unicorn company? Why can't we create a fund for other Black people and, you know, invest in Black businesses? So it's a bigger mission. So for us, it's like, we have to show ourselves all the time. Like, we have to kind of be like, look, this is what we can do. And I mean, one thing we love is the fact we won top 50 fastest growing companies in the UK, because that's testament to just how we work. And I think for us, speed is important. I mean, for any startup, speed is very important. And we don't even have VC money. So if we had VC money, it'll be going even faster, right? So I think the competition is more like, okay, well, that can be done in 2 days. If you don't think so, I can do it in a day. You know, those kind of challenges to kind of be like, all right, cool, let's get it done. But yeah, I think it's just, yeah, we know it's a fast-paced environment, but all startups are. So I think we're not too dissimilar to any other.
I think that's a fantastic answer. You know, the real challenge, the real competition is out there. It's not internally. And it's also a sort of testament to you all in terms of how you manage yourselves to ensure that you understand your respective functions, but you're respecting other people's functions. And akin to what someone's written in the chat here, you have great team chemistry, and it really shows in terms of what you're producing. I want to talk now about the wider challenge, the wider competition. And as a team, your narrative is to sort of change the Black narrative. So what should leaders be doing who are senior in organizations? What should aspiring leaders be doing in order for that to happen?
Yeah.
What do you see progress is looking like? Julie?
So I think we're seeing indications, aren't we? So one of our customers, CBS Viacom, I know one of our account managers, Babs, did some great work with them, and they had a whole policy called No Diversity, No Commission. So I think in order for us to make progress on this, everyone needs to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. I know Tiara mentioned in an earlier conversation to me today that LinkedIn are actually paying their ERG heads, you know, to take on that mantle as well. So I think just the only way we can make progress is by like talking more. Talking is always good, but actually just more action, maybe less talk, more action. You know, talk more about actual policies that have been put in place or real initiatives that are happening. So that's my take on things.
Thank you. Same question.
I'll jump in here. So I think at BYP Network, we've spent the last 5 years speaking to the community, speaking to leaders, speaking to businesses, speaking to professionals, right? And what we've kind of come out with, and I think we spoke about it in the earlier session, is there is a fundamental problem with companies not being educated in the right way when it comes to hiring Black talent, or, you know, even like engaging with or retaining Black talent. Secondly, there is a skills gap that needs to be addressed. And thirdly, you know, we need to work out how companies don't just participate in tokenism. And a lot of the ways what we're building at BYP Network is a reaction to exactly all the problems that we found. And we've got people like John and the team, we've got Tiara, literally to come out there and promote and produce products that help companies address the problems internally. So that's what we're trying to do. So when we're like, oh, what can companies do? Companies can literally come talk to us, work with us, and we can sit there and bridge that gap, because we've got the community. We're growing that community. The community is growing like 20% month on month or something. So we've got that going on. We work with hundreds and hundreds of companies. We've got those insights. We're building products to help companies really address these problems, and nobody solved it. Remember that, like, nobody's actually solved the problem. So
it sounds like you've left enough room to be organic and flexible in terms of the feedback you're getting, and you have a real sort of willingness on the fly to solve problems as they arise.
That's exactly it. We're looking at what the Black community wants in terms of professional development. We're looking at what companies are struggling with, and we're building products to ensure we can bridge that gap more effectively. It takes time, like nobody solved it. So it's also that patience. Like, companies can't expect to invest 5K into their diversity program and expect 50 Black people to come work for them the next year. So understand that it's not a process that happens overnight, but you've really got to invest, in every single employee at your organization needs to be involved. That's what I'd say.
Thank you. Kike, what does progress look like in a year's time, let's say? What would you be happy with compared to what we have now?
Okay, in terms of BYP Network and the solutions we're providing, so for example, obviously our mentorship program, I think Juhi might be able to correct me, but I think we have a target of about 5,000 mentee matches next year. Maybe it's 1,000.
1,000.
And for us, that's one-to-one connection. That's you know, that's a member in our community with a corporate employee who's connected, who might have got a job from that, been upskilled, more confident, or simply they've got a good connection somewhere, right? And that for BYP is huge progress, because we do a lot already and people get connected all the time. But it's a data problem, or we now want to focus more on each individual. So we know, Dom Scott, you want to be mentored by this, you know, by Jean-Marc, and you know your trajectory is this way, and BYP can help fill that gap. And then with that, with the corporates, we want to make sure that they are educating themselves and their employees on the Black experience. So if we're able to say, I don't know, the 5,000 employees in companies have done our Black experience course, you know, that's a big change, that's progress. But I'd say progress as a whole, as a world, you know, on the Black narrative.
Sure.
I mean, we want to see next year that BLM last year isn't just this one-off thing, and like that's why this year has been the way it has been, and now next year's dead. I think it's not a thing. We don't want that next year. We don't want it to be dead silent. I think, as I mentioned earlier, Black History Month has been quite dead in the UK. I don't know if you felt it, but it has. So we just wonder, for us, it's like, do we now keep up this momentum even bigger, and companies start reporting changes? They start hiring more Black talent. There's more Black leaders. This 1.4% FTSE 100 is the same old. It's that same stat that's just not changing. Can't we get that to 5%? You know, I think we want to start seeing the statistics move, and we want to start seeing more positive statistics as well.
Thank you. And Tiara, same question for you. And again, it could be something very sort of localized to your function within the business, or it might be something more sort of macrocosmic as well.
I think it comes down to accountability, really. Like, I want to see brands, make themselves accountable to everything, right? Like, even if you're thinking about your hiring, what we've said is, like, if it's not a diverse pipeline, then you start from scratch, start over. Like, if it's harder, then that means you got to go harder. And I think that level of accountability does not happen. It's like, oh, we tried, we put one ad out, we paid 5,000, we did what we couldn't find them. That's not an excuse, because we're here in droves, and we're educated, and, you know, we have done the work to deserve these awesome roles. So that's just not good enough. So I think you have to hold yourself accountable and your teams accountable at every single step, because bias it's systemic, it's in everything. Right. So if you don't even have the baseline, and what the same conversation Juhi and Mira and I had earlier was about the stats and making sure, like, the population. If the UK has 4% of Black people, that should be your baseline at the very least. And then you can always build from there. But if you don't even have that level of accountability, then it does beg the question, how serious are you about making sure that you do have a diverse workforce?
Thank you very much. Very insightful answer. But unfortunately, I think we've come to an end of the session today. We have about 2 minutes. We can maybe just get one more question in sort of right at the end. Will.i.am sort of mentioned the term audacious during his session. I'm just keen to get a quick sneak peek of something audacious which might be in the pipeline from the BYP that you can maybe share in 20, 30 seconds.
If we share it, everyone will be scared, and then it's too much, so we won't.
Okay, but we know there's something there. We know that much at least, but it's in the pipeline further down the line. So once again, I just want to say it's been a really fascinating experience getting an insight into the BYP top team, and just generally everything that you're trying to do in terms of collaborating with the Black community, which is fragmented in certain areas. It's not just one monolith. There's lots of different groups. You're pulling those groups together. You're collaborating with the business community to pull them together, and then you're combining that with the Black community as well as a number of other stakeholders. Is audacious in itself, and the fact that you're able to demonstrate such collaboration internally within the top team is a really good testament to what's possible in terms of your aspirations over the next period of time. So again, thank you very much for the insight today. It's been a fantastic conference. If you haven't had the chance to check out the expos, make sure you do. It's essentially a careers fair. It's a wonderful opportunity to increase your earning potential or your level of contentment in your working environment. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.